Hello.
Hello, James.
Hey, everybody.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Is there a message box? It says poor network.
What's up, Tom?
There you go.
Ouch. Thanks, James. It's okay.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you could start off. I'll speak directly into the microphone. If you could just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself. Give for those who don't know a little bit of background about who you are and what you do as a freelancer. That'd be great.
Yes. I'm a freelance industrial designer living in Brooklyn, New York. I moved here, I guess, so I graduated from Virginia Tech in 2012. And then I moved here in 2012. I interned at Quirky. And then after that, I took a full-time job at Lifetime Brands. So they do like kitchen tools and gadgets. I was there for 3 years. I did a number of different projects there. I mean, that place was intense because it was like the designers were taking everything from concept through to manufacturing. So it wasn't just like, you do this portion and then hand it off. I worked there for 3 years. Oh gosh, I should have brought some of my projects. Just 1 second. Okay. All right. Okay, so this was the very first product that I ever did. Came to for KitchenAid. They're self-leveling measuring spoons. So the idea is you scoop up the ingredients and level them off with the spoon above it. So I did this my first year there, and I did the production drawings for this. So do you guys do technical drawings?
Yes. Oh yeah.
So yeah, I took these all the way through to the production phase, which is I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. That process is so intensive, and basically like doing every single dimension on this, all of the and so like each one of these parts, all of the dimensions, it's kind of, the weird thing is that from what I understood there, that it was mostly for our benefit to check that the factories had, had followed the CAD that we had sent them. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty intense. It was like, but there were only a couple engineers there, and they were advisors, and so yeah. Is this good? Is this good information? Is this interesting? Yeah. Let's see. Oh my gosh, Henry, my apologies. You got. I like brought in my iPad and I was like on Instagram. Here's the thing: is like I remember people by this like warped sense of what their Instagram handle name is, and like not their actual name. And so I was like, oh yeah, Tom Ripley, that kid.
I think that's actually the character in a movie, too.
Yeah. So anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's gonna stick forever. That's thanks.
I'm just going to call you Mr. Ripley. But anyway, so yeah, so the interesting thing about Lifetime Brands was it was like a large team of designers. It was like 30 designers, and we had 3 engineers with us, and they were basically simply advisors. They took on some projects that were a bit more complex, but everything of this kind of nature, like the designers were doing. So the cool thing about it, the terrible thing about it was having to do the production drawings and all of that. But the cool thing about it was, I mean, this was my design all the way through. There were like, you know, I maybe had to make some compromises, but I produced the final CAD for this product. So it is exactly how I made it to be. So it's kind of unique in that way, in that you have this like ownership all the way through. But that's also a result of the simplicity of the types of projects. And then while I was there, actually the guy, one of the founders of, do you guys know the toothbrush company Quip? Yeah. So that guy was working there in this kind of like advanced concepts group, which was only a couple people. And he eventually left to go like full time with Quip. And you know, this is probably, I think this is sound advice, which is, you know, when I got into Lifetime Brands, I quickly realized that like, there was one group that was doing like super interesting stuff. Not that I wasn't given good projects. And then the first year out of school, like you're just trying to get your bearings. And like, it's, you know, the first couple of years after school is like an extended education. I mean, I still feel like I'm learning a lot out of school. So like one thing is like when I was a senior in college, I had like I guess a quarter life quarter life crisis of like, oh my God, like I'm going to have to convince somebody to hire me to do what I've come here to learn, but I feel like I don't know anything. And it really freaked me out. But then you learn in your first year out of school that there's still a lot of learning to be done, and nobody expects you to be able to do an entire project yourself, especially going to production all by yourself, like right from the get-go. It's kind of ludicrous to even think. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking. Like I was going to graduate and they'd be like, okay, yeah, so we need 24 products designed by March, and you know, you can that, right? It's like, no, nobody's doing that to you right out of school. So I hope that brings ease to somebody's mind. But yeah, it was cool. Like the first year of just like, you know, feeling like, okay, I am still learning, and there are people here who are supporting my learning process. So anyway, when I got in there, and after about a year, you know, there was one group, this advanced concepts group, that was doing like all of the really cool work, the really interesting work. And so, you know, I started building up a relationship with the guy that was the head of the group. And just like just like going out to lunch with him, in group or whatever. This sounds oddly like I was like courting him for dating, but he was also just like a really cool guy. So, and he was one of you might find this in your first job, you might not, but when I was there were a lot of very like jaded designers, like designers that were much older and had been there for a long time and were kind of like over it. And, they were just like, clocking in, clocking out type deal. And they kind of warned me, like they would kind of like pull you aside and tell you like this place, it's gonna, I don't know. They would basically warn you about all of the pitfalls of the organization and how it wasn't good for design and all of these things. And, because they had become so jaded by the whole thing. But, there were other people there who were, just as inspired about design as the day that they showed up. And so this guy, he was very much an advocate for design in this big corporation and had kind of carved this niche for himself within there. So I started just like talking to him and building that relationship. And, eventually I was like, I would love to work with your group. And I kind of planted that seed, and I had no idea if it was going to go anywhere. But eventually, like this guy left and went to go pursue Quip, and there was a slot open in their team. And, this guy asked me he said, you should apply. So, like some things in life, I mean, this might not be that profound of a lesson, but some things in life, it's just like, it's not necessarily you're gonna go in there, you're gonna storm into somebody's office and be like, I want blah 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 blah, like give your whole speech, and then everything's gonna change like that. Like, sometimes you just have to like I said, plant that seed and let it grow as it does. So eventually, I ended up in that group. I had to overcome a lot of political hurdles at that company in order to get into that group. The guy that was the head of the bigger design team was very protective of his team, and I guess the guy who was so the team was called Spark, so like the guy who was the head of the larger design group was not a fan of Spark, because it was a lot of designers who had essentially defected from his group to start this group. But yeah, I mean, so anyway, I was in that team for a while. I guess it was about a year or year and a half, and then the company put in some auditors. And the auditors deemed that our group was not a profit center, and so the company shut down our group. And so, yeah, I was like, oh no, like, I felt like I was having so much fun in that group, and I got a lot of responsibility. So like one of the, I don't know if you guys like follow me on Instagram, but this is like something that I like posted about. Like this was I did like a line of these products for this brand called Rio, which the Spark Group incubated basically. And so, again, this was I think it was in the end, it was maybe 10 products that I brought from, concept through development to quoting, getting it quoted by the factory in about like 2 months. It wasn't all me, but I was the lead on the project, which was a really awesome opportunity. Yeah, it was just like, yeah, it was, it was just like a really great opportunity to take on a lot of responsibility. I mean, at first when I joined the group and I was getting projects where I was leading the charge for entire lines for the brand, it was super intimidating. And it just like took a long time for me to get comfortable with that kind of responsibility and overseeing. It's like, it's one thing to oversee one product to finish, but to then like oversee an entire line for a brand and understand, like really understanding, you know, the brand and the brand language and how do you apply it to different objects. But it was a lot of fun at the same time. Yeah, so they shut down the group, which was terrible, but you know, it happens. And I had to go back to the bigger design group for a little bit, but then my manager got the job as the head of industrial design at Peloton, and so I went over to there. And I started freelancing first, and actually doing some work for my dad's company. He owns a rotational molder in Pennsylvania. So he has a factory doing, do you guys know rotational molding? You guys seen any? Oh yeah. It's wild. I mean, I don't know what your guys' experience is like, but you know, like after going through design school and learning about the different processes and then seeing the results of like injection molding and how complicated that machinery is, and then going back to like rotational molding, it's like, it's such an interesting process and such a crude process in terms of how it, you know, it's just like, you know, gigantic, enormous machinery and like guys like beating parts out of molds with hammers, you know, it's, but it's kind of incredible to watch and to see. But yeah, so I did some work for him, but then started picking up more freelance in the New York area. And I don't know if you guys have any questions. I'm just kind of rambling here.
No, that's great. So you mentioned your work for Peloton, and I think, did you work on that recent treadmill that just came out for them, or that was in concept? I guess tell me about that.
Yeah, so I did a bit of work on that. I was mostly, I guess, in a way, I was overseeing the accessories that were coming with the treadmill. So, like, because I was a freelancer and I was kind of in and out, excuse me, they weren't necessarily putting me on big projects for the treadmill. I actually, towards the end of the development for the treadmill, they just needed somebody to design a neck for the treadmill. So that neck, that's that James Conner's original. So it was, you know, it was a pretty fun, it's fun to like you wouldn't think it, but taking a part of some larger object and just like iterating on that and trying to figure out how that fits in. You know, it's kind of the same thing as like, you know, taking brand language and applying it to different products, but it's like taking brand language that's been applied to this entire object and try to carry through that language to this one component. And also just, you know, obviously make it manufacturable, make it easy for like somebody to take off the back of it in order to like fish the electronic wires through it. And like any repair work that would need to be done. But yeah, so what I actually did most of was the accessories. And so I designed the dumbbells that come with the treadmill. It's kind of, I'll bring them up. Unfortunately, I don't have any of my own yet. but let's see. But yeah, I mean, so this was another case of I was, so this is actually a looks like model that was made off of my concept. Can you see this? Is that okay? So yeah, so the idea behind this, and this was totally like something that I was pushing for. I saw Peloton and I saw the way people viewed their Pelotons, and it was like people are totally comfortable showing off their bikes. Like it's not like other gym equipment where people kind of like hide it away. People are very proud to like show their bikes and have them kind of out on display. So the idea behind this was, it's this thing in the home, like what could I reference within the home to make it feel more comfortable in that setting? And also like this idea of Peloton is open to all levels of athlete. So like making something that doesn't look like one of those like hexagonal weights that just, those dumbbells that look very, they look very like rugged and gritty, and so basically what I did was I made it look like a pillow with an upholstered button. So that was the idea there. I mean, also the square shape for exercises where you're using it for like push-ups for the stability there. Again, for like people who are just starting out working out. But yeah, I just wanted to make something that like lived in the home in a way that was more comfortable than one of the like the hexagonal type weights. So that's pretty much, at this point, that's all I can pretty much talk about in terms of the work that I've done at Peloton. And honestly, kind of all the work that I can really talk about in general. I think since I've started, I think probably I've had like 15 products come to market. Maybe that's maybe fewer than that. Maybe like 12. But yeah, a lot of those are like, these sort of like kitchen sets that are like multiple sets that I had a hand in. But like since starting freelancing, I maybe have like 4 products that are on the market. So yeah.
I had a question about the manufacturing. You mentioned like you did some manufacturability like work on the Peloton stuff. Did you learn that in school or mostly on the job when you got out of school?
Well, I would say that I did most of the manufacturability stuff when I was at Lifetime, and that was almost all of it was learned on the job. Like nobody really expected anybody to like know how to do that when I was at Lifetime Brands. It was very much like in the beginning it was a lot of going to the engineers who were at Lifetime Brands and getting their advice and just like going through drawings with them. Like you would have to have somebody check your drawings, and they would go through and tell you like, oh, you need to thicken this up here. If I had any questions about how to like put stuff together, assemble things, I would go to them, and they would tell me like the process for doing that. I mean, there's a lot of standards that come into play when it comes to like kitchen stuff. I mean, a lot of industries, like there's this thing that like on the peeler, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's like this little tab back here that keeps the blade from like spinning too far. And that's just kind of like a standard thing that you see on a lot of peelers. And you know, the way that they even get the peeler in there is they literally just like pull the arms apart. I mean, I've never seen the machine that does it, so I don't know if it's just like an automated action that does that. And then this is like an overmolded, like, I think it's TPE, like a rubber, like so that's overmolded. I'm not sure. Yeah, so that's I think it's actually, so it's co-molded, I think. Or overmolded with this, so it's like kind of, it's bonded to the plastic. But yeah, just like a little bit of grip there. But yeah, so I learned most of the manufacturability stuff at Lifetime Brands. Since Lifetime Brands, I have not had to do much in terms of manufacturability. You know, it'll depend what job you're in when you're out of school, like, you know, whether the company will ask you to get into those kind of details, or whether it's more just like pure ID and then you hand off to an engineer. You'd probably, I would imagine you would like advise with the engineer, but yeah, I haven't, since leaving Lifetime, I haven't really had to do much of that. I mean, it's good if you can, obviously, like, you don't want to make something that's going to give the engineers like a total headache. You know, it's nice to at least acknowledge the constraints that they're working with. But, you know, like I would say, like, if you're a job out of school, it's like, you know, the engineers are probably expecting a lot of questions from you. And if they're not answering those questions, probably like the industrial design leadership would be.
No question. So, you have a pretty unique sketching style. How does that benefit you, or why do you kind of use that continuous line drawing?
Yeah. So I don't know how it benefits me yet. I'm kind of just like always experimenting with sketching, and just in terms of like how, like, I think a lot of it is just really making the connection between my hand and like my I guess my brain as strong as possible. Like when you feel like, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience when you're sketching and you feel like exactly what's in your head or exactly what you intend is coming out onto the paper, and it feels like it's kind of like a rare occurrence when it happens, like it's like a miracle. But you know, it's a lot about just kind of like this flowing state, I guess you could call it. But yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I am like kind of experimenting with and advocating for is this idea of like continuous line sketching, especially because, I mean, I remember in school, like, you know, my struggles with perspective and seeing other people struggle with perspective, because perspective is like, it's so difficult. And if you get like the tiniest thing wrong, like an ellipse, like one of your lines is slightly off, like it just destroys something, like it just destroys the drawing, it destroys the quality of it. And so I've been trying to figure out, like, would there be a better way of teaching design sketching, or even just design sketching in general, that would alleviate a lot of that pain? Especially, like, I don't know if you guys, like, I remember, like, especially back in school, being very nervous, like standing over or sitting over a white piece of paper and just like, oh God, like, how do I even start? How do I even start here? And you know, I remember, so I don't know if you guys saw the thing that I did with Reed, which was like the watering can thing with all like these form families, but we learned these form families from this guy Joe Ballet, who's from Carnegie Mellon. Really amazing guy and like amazing professor. And one of the things that he did in a sketch demo was like he immediately just made a random mark on the page and was just like, the page is not precious. Like, don't treat it like it's precious. Yeah, I mean, so I do, wait, on Skype, can I turn the camera around on my phone? Let me see. No, I just took wait. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I do have a sheet of paper. I have to just get this set up really quick. So yeah, like this idea of continuous line sketching. I mean, I think there's like a couple of benefits to it, especially when you're starting out drawing. It was one of the first things that I learned in school. It was actually one of the first things that I learned I took an art major in high school. And I like assumed that I knew how to draw, and I came in and did this class, came into my first day of class, and it was continuous line drawing, and it was like banging my head against the wall. I just like did not understand what the purpose of it was. I was like so frustrated because I just was like, I know how to draw. Like, you don't have to teach me how to draw. Like, I think I know how to do this. I've been doing it my entire life. How's the picture and everything? Is it good? Yeah, so like, you know, the idea, so I'll just like sketch this as I'm talking about it. So, you know, like, have you guys, I guess by a show of hands, have you guys done any continuous line drawing?
A little bit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For like a week in our classes. Yeah. And that's yeah.
Wait, so you guys did learn it at school?
Yes. Yeah. A little bit.
It wasn't quite.
Awesome.
It wasn't a big tenet, but it is covering a little bit.
It's like 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, so I mean, stop me if I'm repeating stuff that you've already heard about it. But I mean, the way that I think about continuous line drawing is like, continuous line drawing is a lot about observation. You know, it's almost like, oh gosh, this pen is completely dry. So let's see. I think this should be good. Yeah, so like it's, you know, it's completely about observation, and I'm probably going to mess this up because because it's, you know, a demo, but let's see. So like, all I'm doing is really trying to focus on like the object that's in front of me as I'm doing this. And obviously, like, I'm very familiar with this object, but like, you know, it's I think there's a couple reasons why I advocate so much about it, and observation is one of those things, because as industrial designers, we're constantly observing the world. Like, that's one of the things that we kind of have to get good at is being observational, and like seeing what people are doing, like, you know, all of these observations that we do in our lives just enrich our design work and enrich our understanding of people, because, you know, we're designing for people. We should understand them. Also, you know, observation in terms of objects, to really understand, just like, you know, one of the things that I do a lot in the morning right now is I've been like continuous line sketching people's shoes on the subway. You know, it kind of helps you to understand like the hierarchy of the object, because you're sketching the things that you're noticing. And so it almost gets you into the mind of the designer of like, how do they want me to move throughout the object with my eye? And like, how do I get people to look, and you know, from the other side of it, as a designer, like, how do I get people to notice the things that I want them to notice within the design? And then the other part of it, the other observational part of it, is just, you know, design is almost a process of observing your own mind. As you're designing, as you're sketching, you're kind of, I like to think of it as like you're in a car with the windshield wipers on, or you're like unfogging a mirror or something. You're kind of like slowly unfogging this mirror and like seeing the design that you are creating, because it might not emerge like immediately. So like, you know, if I were gonna do like another peeler, so like similar, like curved shape, so just like coming in here, and I'm just like trying to understand like what is the most prominent part, you know. So I have the outer shape, and then I have just like the overall gesture. You know, I've got this grip in the back. Maybe actually the grip comes all the way up to the front here. And so like, you know, the beauty of this sketching is like, it's supposed to be loose, and it's supposed to be fast, and like you're kind of, as you're moving around the page, you're also creating literal connections between parts of the design. So you're understanding like, you know, how things are connecting within your object. After I've done that, I can then use this as an underlay for, you know, something much more refined. But I'll still like do some continuous line, just because it's like it's a method that I'm very comfortable with. You know, I just like, I like the, you know, to move in that way across the page. I just think it's like efficient, and, you know, so this it's not the best, but, you know, so like, just like really, it's a really nice way of roughing something out and sort of figuring it out as you go. So I'll just, maybe I'll do one more. So I'll do what's referred to as a Euro style peeler. So it's kind of like that. Can you see that? Yeah, it's kind of like that. So let me see. So So, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Is this something that you would show a client, or are these drawings for you?
You know, I had the same question when I was at the Core 77 conference. Or not the Core 77, the Square One conference. And I was like, absolutely not, never show this to anybody. But, you know, then I saw the creative sessions workshop, and they were only working at a fidelity that was like slightly higher than this, and just taking it into Photoshop and rendering it out. And it was just like, oh, no, I could show this to a client if they're showing it to a client. I mean, so, you know, just quickly, I could do something like this. So I've got my iPad here. So let's try this out. Let's see if this works. Okay. Bear with me. Oh no. Here we go. Okay. So let's see. Uh-oh. NDA. NDA. Don't look. Okay. You'll just have to cut that part out. So let's see. So yeah, usually I would do this on my phone. But I'll do this because my phone is now being used. So yeah, I think this is like, you know, a perfectly acceptable level, especially in like initial design. Oh, I see that I've got some glare on the screen. Maybe I don't need that. Can you guys still see it? Okay, so let me brighten this up a little bit. But yeah, I think that like, actually, let me go into photos. Oh no, I'm just like revealing all sorts of secrets to you guys. So I'm just like touching it up really quick. Let's see. I think that's pretty good. I wonder what's going to happen if I turn this lamp off. Okay, so you know, so then I would take this into here and just go multiply and start, you know, filling it in. But yeah, I don't see why this couldn't be totally acceptable to show to a client, especially like in the initial phases of the project. I think like, you know, you can level their expectations and be like, you know, these are going to be some rough ideas. And, it depends on the client. Like some clients are kind of like, you know, they know the design process, so it's nothing all that new to them. But other projects you might have, or other clients you might have to do some hand holding and figure out like how much they, you know, let's see, how familiar they are with the design process. So yeah. Oh, right. anyway, I mean, that's pretty quick. On my screen, it looks like I'm telling you guys like scary stories about sketching. Is it that?
No, this is great.
I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
form families? Because I've heard that mentioned a few times in your podcast, and I don't think we've ever like really talked about form families here. Maybe I'm just missing.
Yeah, so that's something that was sure. So I'm not going to need to travel through my iPad because there might be more confidential stuff in there, but yeah. So the form family were and the whole idea behind them was basically to create a language, like a common language that we could all use to talk about form. Because right now, like, how would you guys go about describing a form? Like, how would you describe this form, like, as just a form? Does anybody want to go for it?
Organic.
Soft.
What's that?
There's soft and organic were ones that were shouted out.
Soft and organic. So yeah, I mean, we use these adjectives, and we use these words like organic or industrial, but there's no real just like pure like form type language that we can all use to talk about and discuss form. So in terms of the form families, so this would be considered a flow form, because it has direction to it. So Joe talked about flow forms. A lot of it was like flow forms, but also like like an iron, so the iron has like this directionality. It like comes from this one point, and a lot of irons, they almost have like a speed to them, but there's this kind of flow that is kind of like shaping the form. You would also, like, a mouse is also like, it's a flow form. So it's just this that's one of the families. So I'll go through the whole, I'll do the Cliff Notes version. So the idea is you have text forms, which I have a bunch of videos on my Instagram kind of going over different exercises with tectoforms. So it's lots of like rectilinear forms that come together at hard angles. I like to think of them as like low poly forms, almost like an old video game. It's very sort of jagged and tectonic, and so there's a couple different ways that you can build tectoforms. You can start with kind of like a base shape and chop off of it, or you can add pieces onto it, or you can build it like I was doing here, which is almost like folding a piece of paper to generate form. And then, so from there, so yeah, that's the tectoform family. And then there's rotoforms, which are pretty simple, but it's all about sort of like revolving around a central axis. There's kind of like two ways that you can generate these forms. One of which is to like create a series of ellipses. So let's say, and I would just go through and connect them and create the panel. And the ellipses are symmetric around that axis. So you create the symmetrical form. Another way to do it is just to like like the profile, and then off of that generate your ellipses, and then come in and create your your mirror profile. Yeah, generating like symmetrical rotational forms. You can also obviously like well, not obviously, but you can bend the axis, or you could even make the axis be like bend at an angle, or curve, but it's still the same idea that everything is rotated around this axis, and then off of there you generate your forms, and so that they are symmetric around the axis. Flow forms, so just discuss those. It's all about this idea of directionality, and then you kind of from these planes that you create, you can sort of decide, okay, so maybe I have a form like this, and so like the way that form actually looks is like this plane comes up, this plane comes in, this plane comes out. You can use a lot of contours with flow forms in order to really establish the form itself. And then there are blob forms, which or I guess now they're plastiforms. So the idea here is you start with an outer shape, and then you use 3 contours to define that shape. So they're kind of those like softer organic forms. But yeah, like you can kind of think of them as like like a pebble, like a pebble that's been like rounded, sitting in a stream, worn down over time. But yeah, you can sort of get. I like plastiforms a lot, sketching them, because it is so much about like starting with this like outer shape, and then going in and defining it with these contours. So yeah, that's kind of a Cliff Notes of the form families, but there's a lot to dive into, and of course you can obviously you could take a tectoform and intersect it with a rotoform, to do something. Like you can obviously intersect any of these, and you also find that, like, for instance, tectoforms, something might have like a base composition that is something like a tectoform, so like a stool, but then like the pieces of the stool itself might have something that's more a plastiform top, and then obviously like rotoform legs, so you can combine these in a number of ways to create some unique forms. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
James, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the pain points of starting a podcast and kind of what you're seeing with the growing media around industrial design in general?
Well, what was the second part? Sorry.
Just like the trends that you're seeing. Kind of, there's like this big growing media behind industrial design, or like these personalities for industrial design, like kind of what you're seeing there, and your opinion of how we as students can like make industrial design more known, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, let me turn the camera back around. So I mean, if you guys want to see my face again, let's see. Okay. All right. So, the pain points behind starting a podcast. I would say there weren't a lot. I mean, so, and I don't mean that to sound like, oh, starting a podcast is easy. The thing is that with the podcast, it was very much it was something that I had been looking to do for a while. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do a podcast about. I had done a radio show in college, a couple different radio shows in college. So like playing music, initially, but then also doing some talk show type stuff later on. But it was about like movies and entertainment. But then, what ended up happening is pretty much just like, I started forming the relationship with Nick through Instagram. He came to the city, moved to the city, and we would just have these long chats about design, and eventually he proposed starting the podcast. And I would say that the pain points are actually more recently. I would say they're like the pain points have emerged. Like it's easy to start something. It's very difficult to sustain. But we're starting to bring in people to interview, and I don't know. I can probably talk about design until I die. But the thing is, like, we're kind of adding layers onto it. So like now with the YouTube, doing the editing for that, you just like, I've gotten so excited about the podcast, and I have to focus so much time on it. But the real pain point is that, like, we're doing it just as we want to do it. And I mean, like I said, kind of related, like, to what I was saying earlier about things not necessarily like paying off immediately, but it may pay off down the road. It's like, but at the same time with the podcast, it's always been about like Nick and I just wanting to do this. But it's tough when you're trying to live and work and also like produce this podcast and make it a good podcast, as good as you can do it. So yeah. And then as far as social media, I don't know. I mean, the thing with design social media is like, I guess I some trends in it, and I find them all very interesting and fascinating, and that's about as much as I like engage with them. I think that, like, as much as I can keep like social media for myself and my work, mostly about what I'm interested in, and not necessarily. I don't think you were asking, like, do you follow the trends and are you trying to follow the trends? But basically, I guess what I'm saying is that, like, when it comes to that kind of stuff, all I'm looking to do is just like sustain in a way that is satisfying to me. Like, because you can see people following trends, and I tried to sketch, and it totally like burnt me out, like back when I started Instagram, yeah. So I mean, are the trends you're referring to like Could you name any?
I don't know that I was really referring to like a specific trend. It was more so, I just was curious, like your thoughts on the growing ID media. Like there hasn't been that much content in regards to ID in the past 10 years, and we're
Right.
this big jump.
Yeah. Okay. So I totally went off on an unrelated tangent, but yeah. In terms of like ID, like the ID media thing, I kind of exciting. You know, we started our podcast, and now ADS has their podcast, and I would honestly love to see more things like that, or people doing something, you know, completely their own, you know, venturing out into different areas of social where other people haven't really tread yet. You know, I think that I love it right now in terms of like all this, because it feels like it's very much in its infancy, and it feels like there are a lot of growing pains. But I think that's like always the most exciting part of any industry, is like, you know, we've seen like the birth of so many industries in our lifetime. You know, just like watching the whole like 3D printing industry emerge and go through its growing pains, and it's still going through growing pains. I think that there's like a lot of there's a lot of interesting things to come, and it's just fun to see how people are engaging with it and finding their niche and finding their voice. And like I don't want to be the only industrial design podcast, you know, and that ADS, but it's like, even then, you know, starting a podcast is like as easy as just having a microphone and recording, you know, and it's like, it's so simple, and I would love to hear just like more people's point of views, and because I don't think we are the end all be all by any means. Like when we sit down to record, we're pretty much just like recording those late night conversations that you have in studio, where you're just like 85% might be totally ridiculous nonsense, and then like you might get like a little kernel of something interesting, but you know, you kind of wade through all of this, and you know, it's about that conversation, and about like talking to friends about these things that you're just like have been on your mind, and you just like, you know, you just like want to talk through. So yeah, it's I'm very optimistic about where it's all going, and you know, I'm so curious to see what's coming over the horizon. So yeah. So maybe one more question, if anybody has a question.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, I've seen, and you and Nick and Reed Schlegel have kind of like touched on this in the podcast a little bit, but I was kind of curious what your thoughts are on using Instagram. It's kind of exploded as far as like being used as a way of showing off parts of your portfolio, or at least little instances of it. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are as far as using it as a tool for, do you think it's more of a tool for engaging the design community, or do you feel like it's more of a tool for showing your portfolio?
That's interesting. I think the people that are using it as a tool for purely to show their portfolio work are going to, it's not going to be satisfying and sustainable for them. I mean, this is just completely my thoughts. I use it as like, I it as like a supplementary portfolio. It's like the place where I put all the stuff that I would have in my portfolio, but things that I'm interested in. And I feel like, you know, it's happened for me that I feel like it rounds out my character, because it's difficult to give a sense of who you are and what you're as a designer purely through your portfolio, because, you know, your portfolio feels like, you know, you like dress to the nines, like you've got on your best outfit to like go out and strut your stuff, and it's like, you know, it's Instagram is not that. And I feel like because it's not that, it gives people a better sense of actually who you are and what you're interested in. And you know, I think it's much more engaging to be a part of the community than to just kind of like, you know, show off, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't like to be too prescriptive about like how I think people should use Instagram, because I think people should be free to like find their voice on Instagram and feel it out. And I, you know, like I love seeing cool work, but I feel like the place for like cool polished work is on like Behance, where I think Instagram is just like a great place for just like and seeing what sticks. So yeah, did that answer your question?
And I completely agree with you. Only because I don't know, I feel like people put such a heavy emphasis on Instagram as far as like trying to make something polished and trying to make something good for other people to see. Especially like as far as like you see people that are like trying to craft the perfect caption for a post or something like that.
Right.
It's just kind of silly, but as far as like creating a portfolio goes. But I know that having a Behance or having a personal site would definitely be of a higher priority as far as just like prospective employers or.
Right. Cool.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for talking with us, James. I know it's probably pretty late there in New York, but I really appreciate you Skyping in. Sorry for the kind of poor quality of our Wi-Fi here at ASU, but it was really great having you, and I know everyone here appreciates you answering our questions and showing stuff off. So yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, and yeah, it's great talking to you guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you.
Well, bye.
Thank you.
Cool. All right.
Oh, it's gonna stay.